Okay, y'all, this is just going to be a brief follow-up to the video that I posted yesterday about the theory that I have that there's some sort of portal that opens in July. And I didn't throw any particular date out in the last video because I'm not a fan of dates, so let me just say that as a disclaimer. Nobody hates a date more than I do, so I'm not trying to put any kind of date out there as though you need to sit on your hands and wait that something happens on a particular day. I'm really just seeing like a clear delineation point between the before and after. And again, I started feeling this date back in fall of last year, that was like the marker in my mind, was like, make it through July. The July seems like the thing. And then when the eclipse came, it felt as though a cycle had just ended on the eclipse and a new cycle was going to begin in mid to late July. And that the time between was like the debrief period. If you've ever played a video game, it's like when you level up from one game, before you start playing the next level, you're usually put through like an introductory phase. There's like a teaser trailer or something that introduces you to the new characters, the new map, the new tools, everything. And even new aspects of identity, right? Because maybe you can play a different character, something like that. So this phase in between has just felt like the debrief. That's kind of the preparation phase, I guess, for whatever it is that starts or activates or whatever. And again, it's like I'm not seeing any kind of particular event. It just feels like a marker. I don't know how else to say it. But thank you to everybody that responded to the last video. And I had no idea that Cliff High was looking at the date of July 15th. And the only reason why I posted that video yesterday is because I had done a reading on Monday with a new friend, Ariane. Shout out Ariane if you're watching. And July 15th came up. And I can't remember if I had mentioned it to her or if she had just mentioned it to me, but she said that July 15th is the day that they perform that cremation of care ceremony at the iconic Bohemian Grove. So shout out Bohemian Grove if you're watching. But I had no idea that that was the date that they do that on. So that sent me down the rabbit hole. So again, thank you, Ariane, for sharing that because that seems significant. Now, I have no idea what the cremation of care is about. I'm sure it's nothing good. But very interesting. So I had to do my research on July 15th and find out if there were any ancient holidays that were practiced on the 15th. So I went to my favorite resource right now, which is ChatGPT. I highly recommend using it for research, especially with this weird stuff, because ChatGPT is great at just compiling information, right? Google is exhaustive and tedious, and 9 times out of 10, you can't find what you're looking for. But ChatGPT is very, very effective. I know it's AI, whatever, but just make it work for you is what I say. So I asked it to do basically a comparative mythology of all of these different cultures and show me, does anybody practice on July 15th? And it turned out that there was an ancient Greek holiday. Now, remember, ancient Greece would be Greece, the Levant, Turkey, all of those countries, northern Egypt. That was Greece at one point, the Greek Empire at least. And they would practice this holiday that they called Cronia, Kronia, like Kronos, Saturn, that dude. And the way that they would celebrate this holiday is that the aristocracy would act like the peasants or the servants, and they would treat the peasants and servants like royalty for a day, and they would serve them. So it was all about this role reversal, role swap. It's the same thing that they did later in the Roman Empire during the Saturnalia, right? So Cronia, Kronos is Saturn, Saturnalia. The difference is Cronia is celebrated on July 15th. Saturnalia was celebrated on December 25th, which became Christmas. But they would do the same role swap, right? So that eventually became Boxing Day, right? Which in the UK was when the aristocracy would take care of the servants, right? So this same tradition is kind of carried through history in terms of that role swap, right? And again, there's July 15th and Christmas, so I don't know if it's a Christmas in July thing. I'm just going to throw that out there. But anyways, just this whole thing about the role swap, very interesting. That reminded me of another ChatGPT deep dive that I did before the eclipse, where I asked it to give me a comparative mythology of what the ancients thought about eclipses in terms of their superstitions, rituals, customs, whatever. and it yielded a very interesting result in terms of the Sumerians. So the Sumerians assumed that the eclipse was a very bad omen for their king because their kings were impostor kings, right? These kings did not have divine right to rule. They were not even related to the people that they governed. They were just tyrants, right? So the bad karma that was coming to the king had to do with the imposter quality of it, right? So they would remedy that by deposing the king during eclipse season, treating the king like a peasant, and making a peasant into the king, right? Which they would call the fool king. And the idea is that that would deflect the energy and protect, the imposter king and allow him to retake his reign, right? Well, this tradition carried over as the April Fool. So the April Fool was something that would happen, I guess, throughout like the European monarchies, where on the first day of the year, which used to be April, the court jester would be made king for a day. Now, back in the day, they were not working with the same calendar that we're working with, right? So April kind of rises in the same position every year on our calendar, but on a lunar calendar, it's constantly fluctuating. So with a lunar calendar, the way that that worked was that it would be 3-year cycles. So you would have 2 years with 12 moons each, and then the third year would have 13 moons in it. And they would call that a lunar leap year. So the first 2 years would be 354 days each, and then the third year would be 383 days. So you can see how the dates would constantly fluctuate, right? Which is probably why they got rid of it, but I digress. With a lunar calendar, the first day of the month and the year is always going to start on a new moon. April of this year, we had an eclipse on a new moon, April 8th. That was the first day of the Hebrew calendar, right? So their new year starts on the first day of the month of Nisan, which would have been this year, April 8th on the Western calendar. New moon, right? A solar eclipse is always going to happen on a new moon. It's interesting that these eclipse traditions kind of carried over from one to another, but they always celebrated it the same way, right? The European monarchs were imposters, the Roman monarchs were imposters, all the way, turtles all the way down, right? Imposters all the way down. So, how interesting is it that before the eclipse that just happened, we had an imposter king that got thrown right out of the tower with P. Diddy, right? No person alive has ever said that their favorite rapper is P. Diddy. Even P. Diddy's favorite rapper is not P. Diddy, right? So thrown out of the tower, gone. Imposter king, right? I mean, it's very interesting when you just think about all of the different customs and traditions and all of that. I digress. But one question that I have right now is that it's like, it seems like we have a lot of fool kings running around out there. I mean, pick a country. It seems like that country found the least qualified person to put in office right now. Is it because of what it is that's happening, right? I have questions. The other thing too is that it's like that supernova. I've recorded this video a few times, so I don't realize if I've talked about this already, but there's that supernova that they keep teasing in the press, right? And it's a supernova that's going to happen in a constellation that's called the Northern Crown, right? And it's a Latin name. I'll let you Google it yourself because I don't want to say it, but it's the Northern Crown, right? Crown, Kronos, crown. If you know what we went through the last couple of years, the Latin word for crown was everything that happened in the last couple of years. The Northern Crown is about to go supernova. And when it goes supernova, it's apparently going to be the brightest star in the sky. Somehow they can predict this, right? I don't know how they can predict a supernova. And apparently it's a regular supernova that happens on a cycle, right? So that's a new thing for me. I thought that was a one and done kind of situation, but apparently there's such thing as a regular supernova. That brings me back to the story of the Christmas story, right? So there's Christmas again, where the Magi recognized this new star in the sky and somehow knew that that meant that there was trouble for King Herod, right? King Herod was the imposter king that was instilled by the empire to govern that particular part of the world. And King Herod was very well aware that this star meant bad news for him because he was an imposter, right? Because there was a true sovereign, a true monarch that was being born out there somewhere, right? So my question is, how did the Magi know that that star corresponded to the true monarch? How would they know that? And theoretically, if what we've been told about the Magi is true, we're supposed to believe that they have 30,000 years of history almost. Well, a group with 30,000 years of history would have been able to record these regular supernovas, right? And understand the cause and effect and all of that. So I have questions. And my question is this supernova that they keep kind of hyping up related to what it is that's happening? Another interesting thing is that around the eclipse, I started getting this download that there was a new chakra that was activating. And that in and of itself is weird for me because I don't really work with chakras or think of them like that. But for whatever reason, that's the language, right? And I'm wondering, is it the same thing as the purple heart that's been coming up in the readings and the sand readings? I think Cindy talked about this. She might have talked about the star chakra. Somebody else talked about it. Cindy from Awakening to Spirit. Um, but everybody's talking about something, right? So a lot of people are talking about the Christ consciousness coming online and something like that. Is that the same thing, right? I don't think we're looking or talking about one individual here. I think the qualification right now is if you have a pulse, you qualify in terms of activating this star chakra, this crystalline consciousness, whatever. And is that what we're talking about here? And then just another bead that I'm stringing on this necklace that feels somewhat connected to what's going on right now is everything that's happening with the water, right? So the water here on the east coast of the United States has turned into crystal clear blue Caribbean water, which is very strange. And there's scientific explanations, and they're saying, oh, it's the Gulf Stream, and it's this, that, and the third. But now there's videos coming out of lakes and landlocked bodies of water that are also turning crystal clear and blue. So you can't use the Gulf Stream to describe that. So what's happening there? And then the other thing that's happening in my local area is that animals that have either been hunted to extinction or polluted to extinction are returning. So we have seals in New Jersey right now. You can Google it, Sandy Hook, New Jersey. Sandy Hook is right at the mouth of the Hudson River. You can see the New York skyline from there. It's disgusting. Even after all RFK did for the rivers, I would still never swim in Sandy Hook. I used to go there with the Boy Scouts as a kid to clean needles off of this beach. Like, that's how disgusting it was. But the seals are there, which means the water must be pretty good. There's families of whales and dolphins that are moving into the Hudson River, which is still, I would assume, relatively disgusting. I mean, New York is still there, Jersey is still there. But I digress. I mean, something is changing. There's manatees that are moving further north. They're finding them in either Georgia or the Carolinas, something much further than where they usually are, which is southern Florida, like the tip of southern Florida. So these migrations of animals, you can look at it from an ominous perspective of like, uh-oh, things are changing and this is bad. But it's like, but is it? Because if they were supposed to be there, and the only reason why they're not there is because we polluted the heck out of this environment and hunted them to extinction, then this is a good thing. It's like, are things going left or are things healing? And that's kind of my consensus. But then also the poetry of where this water is coming from. It's like what they're telling us is that it's coming from the deep, and that's why it's so clear, and it's also why it's so cold. The water is significantly colder than it used to be. Not like unbearable, but it's in like the low 60s, which it's good for you for if you're trying to take that cold plunge. But I don't know, and I can understand why the seals would love that too, right? So it's like, was it always supposed to be that way, and then something shifted that made it what we were used to? But it's actually not supposed to be like that. I mean, I have questions. So again, it's like these animals returning to where they're supposed to be, the environment spontaneously kind of healing itself, and everything else that's going on. So just all very interesting information. I wanted to string all of that together. So again, there's, I'm not particularly seeing any kind of event, so I have no prediction with that. But I do think that there's just interesting things going on out there. And for whatever reason, for the last couple of months, when I've thought about July, I've thought about this supernova. Or when I've seen the articles about the supernova, I've thought about July, right? So I'm not saying that it happens then. It's like I don't want to make a prediction, right? Because I feel like the energy of making a prediction kind of guarantees that it won't happen. That's the energy of like the High Priestess card, right? If the Roman emperor went to the high priestess and said, am I going to be victorious in battle? She knows that if she predicts a victory, he's not going to bring his A game and it's not going to happen, right? So basically, it's like she has to tell him that he's probably going to lose in order for him to win, if that makes sense. So it's like I don't want to muck up any predictions, but also it's like I'm not requiring any kind of star to go supernova in order for things to happen. I don't think that that's the case, but it's just interesting poetic language, right? Are they even actually referring to a real supernova, or is it just some coded thing, right? Because all of the articles I've read for the last couple of months have made it seem like it could happen any day. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen. Hasn't happened yet. So I don't know. I have questions, but yeah. So the web bots are finding something. So shout out Cliff High if you're watching. And I think that's pretty much all that I've got. So very interesting. Role swap, role reversal, something like that. Restoring the true where the false has been, right? So the true ecosystem coming back online, right? The true animals returning to the place that they're supposed to be. True sovereignty being restored where it's supposed to be. I think it's going to be very, very, very interesting. And and again, especially in terms of, all of the fools and imposters that are currently, in governance, wherever they may be, on all sides of the aisles, right? Trust and believe. I am not talking about any one in particular. I'm talking about red, blue, purple, green. I don't care. All of them. Get out. So that's all I've got. And that's all that I wanted to share. So again, there's no anticipation with an event. There's no sit on your hands and wait. There's nothing you need to do to qualify. I'm seeing it again as like the bookends, where it's like something completed on the eclipse, then we're in this holding phase, this acclimatization. Lisa just put out a great video about tempering, right? This temperance phase. So Lisa M. Harrison, check that out. Excuse me. My throat chakra is activating. Maybe my star chakra is next. Fingers crossed. But that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys have a beautiful week, and I will see you again soon. Bye, y'all.